Good, good. So I guess we'll kick it off. Excited to be here. It looks like we're going to be the ones kicking off the day, so that's exciting.
It is
Uh,
exciting.
yeah. So let me maybe start with just giving a quick introduction about myself, and then we'll jump right into it. So my name is Jesus Ramirez. I am the VP of Strategy and Innovation at Tallwave. So Tallwave is a customer experience design company. We partner with bold, ambitious, and really purpose-driven companies who are shaping the future of customer experience. And I'm here today with Lisa Stockman, the CMO of Banfield Pet Hospitals. And again, really excited about this conversation. I think for people on the West Coast, it's it's the morning, so that maybe they're having their coffee. For those on the East Coast, maybe sitting down to have lunch. So this is perfect timing for us to get started. So maybe a good place to start, Lisa, would be just learning about you. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself and then the journey that really led you to where you are today?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm as you noted, I'm the CMO of Banfield Pet Hospitals, Chief Marketing Officer, and got here by sort of an interesting path and love being part of the pet category, the pet community. It's really at this time, especially during the pandemic, it's wonderful to work with pets and lucky enough to work with some of the best veterinarians in the industry. But I started my career in entertainment, actually in advertising, moved over to entertainment, marketing, worked for a long time for different divisions of Time Warner. I worked for HBO, I worked for Time Warner Cable, I worked for Time Inc. And really got my training sort of how to build brands in that corporate setting. And as my son says, that's when there was a Time Warner. I was like, yes, when there was a Time Warner. But an amazing part of my experience. And just working with brands, entertainment, how to sort of engage people, how to motivate people. I think all of marketing is always about sort of the buy. You want them to buy your products, whatever they are. And throughout my career, I've had some interesting stints, spent some time at limited brands, and also some time in financial services, which was great. But most of my career has been, I moved from entertainment to healthcare. I was chief marketing officer at City of Hope for a number of years. And from there, a colleague who was at Banfield Pet Hospital said, hey, you would like to, you might like the pet industry. And it wasn't something that I really thought. If you had told me, I would be working for Banfield Pet Hospital, I was like, now, why would I do that? but I have to say, it has been an amazing journey to go from human healthcare to the pets. Banfield is one of the divisions of Mars Inc. Working for Mars company has just been really delightful. So, and again, the whole purpose of this is that working with Banfield, which is a purpose-driven organization, my first go around with the veterinarians, with the doctors. And of course, to be a veterinarian, it's something that is often a calling. Vets will tell you that when they were 7 or 8, they decided they want to be a vet. So it's great to work with those people who have a natural calling and a natural care and empathy. And how do we sort of, as we look at Banfield, we always look at not only the pet, the client, the doctor, and sort of working through all those different groups and how do we sort of position and shape Banfield Pet Hospital has been my job. And it's just been, it's very marketing in terms of try to get new clients in, acquisition, try to keep our old clients, retention, acquisition, retention, and then build a brand, an umbrella that everyone that knows Banfield can be comfortable with. So it's been an interesting journey, always in marketing. I think if someone asked me, well, what has propelled you? I was like, it's always been my curiosity and the fact that there's a challenge. How do we I remember from graduate school and B school, it was always like, how do we help this man? How do we make things better? I think that has been sort of my guiding light in terms of, how can I make an impact in the work that I do? And it's been easy when you work at a place, not easy, but, interesting at a place at Banfield because people are so incredibly, they're into the purpose, they're into their work, they're committed.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I mean, you hit on so many interesting things, everything from your experience and how that shaped you over the years and really brought you to Banfield. And that's really interesting. And then you also hit on COVID and the role that pets have had during this past year. And I think that's really fascinating. Perhaps we'll get into that at some point during the conversation, because I think that is really fascinating.
Yeah, no, it is. It absolutely. And I'm one of those people that I got a COVID puppy. I have a puppy that I got in, I think well, I know I got her in November. Her name is Pia, but she's been an incredible companion and, my newest baby, especially during COVID when you're feeling isolated. So to see firsthand and that human animal bond, which I grew up with dogs and I raised my children with dogs, but now I have my own dog, and it's been a really unique and good experience. So I know how comforting they are.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. You mentioned, so you mentioned your journey, and you talked about some of the incredible organizations that you've worked with, and you started to talk a little bit about Banfield in particular and what really drew you to Banfield. I'm wondering if you might be able to just elaborate a little bit more, because you started to hit on it, but I'd love to just maybe kind of unpack that a little bit more, because I do think that there are some unique characteristics about Banfield, and I'd love to maybe hear those from you.
Sure. I think one of the things that certainly was a plus for me for Banfield is that it is indeed a mission-driven brand. It's something that comes from our purpose, a better world for pets. And the people who I work with on an everyday basis, that's part of quite frankly, part of their halo, a part of their energy. So with Banfield, it was certainly, I spoke about how can I make a difference? How could I be part of, expanding Banfield's footprint, but even more so, how could I be part of expanding Banfield in the hearts and minds of consumers? So I was certainly driven by the idea that I could make a difference and I could help this organization. But the people that are part of the whole veterinarian process are really very, very special, that whole category. Very driven by care, empathy, making the pets better, because obviously the pets can't speak themselves. So,
Yeah.
The role that the doctor plays is so critically important. So I was certainly, I found it kind of, in some ways, kind of fascinating that there's this group that is so involved in the whole human animal bond and how to make it better. So,
Yeah.
and I thought from a marketing perspective, it was a great, I had done some work in retail, I had worked in healthcare, and to be honest, after doing human healthcare and then doing with the pets, human healthcare can be very, very sad, very, very sad, very serious, and critically important. Don't get me wrong. But the pets, if you've ever seen sort of, a basket full of puppies, that's love, So, it's been great to be part of an organization that is keeping these pets healthy. And Banfield is generally, when you buy a puppy, Banfield's usually your first step. When you get a puppy, your Banfield is usually one of your first stops in terms of wellness, care. So, we do work that's important, and there's just a lot of love. You see those puppies and you're like, oh my God.
Yeah.
So,
Who doesn't love a basket full of puppies?
Puppies, I know.
That's amazing. So, you mentioned that the Banfield is a mission-driven company. It's quite clear just in our brief conversations. Can you share what that means specifically within Banfield?
Yeah, well, within Banfield, we have a lot of key issues that all of our associates rally around. Sustainability is really important. And we've started numerous projects inside the organization, outside the organization, to address those issues. Corporate social responsibility. We play a huge role with our local shelters. Banfield has over 1,000 hospitals across the U.S. And we have a huge volunteer arm of Banfield that plays a role in helping shelters, local shelters. We are very much part of the communities where we reside. And I think that's really important. We also have the Banfield Foundation, which is Banfield's charitable arm. And they've been around for about 5 years and impact over 5 million pets since their inception. So when you look at sort of the work that Banfield does in the communities and in our larger footprint, you'll see that they're very concerned about the communities we live in and how do we give back. And constantly, there's a rallying cry, how do we make this a better world for pets? And you'll see that that sort of activity is part of our DNA.
Yeah, that's great. You mentioned one thing that I found really interesting, which was the Go Greener paper initiative. And obviously there's a lot of things that you guys are doing, but wondering if you can touch briefly on that one in particular.
Yeah, absolutely. What we had almost a 40% reduction in terms of our paper usage, and I think that you'll see this in many corporations across the U.S. Just less reliance on paper and more reliance on technology, and we've joined that sort of march. Making sure that we're using digital technology to sort of erase our footprint as much as possible, and making it easier for customers to access us and get information about their pets. So, and just being very intentional about how we can sort of again reduce that footprint. It's been great to see. I mean, when you look at Banfield, we have a lot of enthusiastic associates, a lot of millennials. So there's always a lot of energy about sort of what is our larger purpose. You will see that throughout the organization and what impact we're having.
Yeah, I think that's really appropriate with with Earth Day
Yes.
upon us. And I know at our company we're doing an Earth Day competition, and we incentivize people, and it makes it a little bit more competitive, and it's fun. Everybody gets involved in it, and our employees are also both competitive, and they care about those things as well. So
care about the planet. Absolutely. Absolutely. It becomes a challenge a little bit now that we're all sort of dispersed. You don't have the same sort of camaraderie, but people care, whether it's through Zoom or whatever, activities being had. There's definitely a lot of concern for, how do we make a difference?
Yeah. No, I know that's something that a lot of people are thinking about these days, and that's fantastic. So so the event is, so I'm going to maybe switch a little bit. It's in the same kind of vein, but really the event is around purpose-driven marketing, and and one thing I'd be curious to hear from you is, what role does your purpose, which is a better world for pets, play in your brand awareness, in your marketing efforts? How does it come up? How do you incorporate it?
Well, how do we incorporate? We incorporate it in a couple of ways. We launched a new campaign about a year ago, which is Banfield Here, and it's the idea of, you'll see it's like be here, and it's the idea that Banfield and all the associates, the doctors, everyone, that we're here for you, that we're part of your local community, and I think that's how you'll see the brand being expressed throughout, certainly throughout all of our internal work, but also all of our external consumer facing work. And at Banfield, it's interesting. We have incredibly enthusiastic associates who are rallying and are in support of how can Banfield be here for people? How can Banfield be here for the pets that we love? So, you'll see that our brand essence really encompasses all of that meaning, all of that thoughtfulness. So in all the work that we do, whether it's acquisition work, retention work, it really is understating or making sure that we are sharing with all the communities that we serve, that we are here for you, that we are part of your community, that we are part of a larger purpose. And with that, we provide incredible care for pets and wellness. And I think all of that leads to, our sort of larger tag, a better world for pets. I think the consistency with which we work and the communication that you see ladders up to that brand purpose. And it's very important. And it's not, we don't just say it, we live it, and I think that's the difference between sort of purpose-driven brands. And the people who work in this space, Jesus, are people who really want to be in the space, right? Like they're committed. And they understand that when you come to one of our hospitals, you're concerned about your pet, whether it's something that's happened right away or you're concerned about something that will happen. So I think everything that we do touches on that larger purpose. And we're just lucky enough, or lucky is probably not the right word, but people who want to be in this space are in this space. So you have a lot of care, you have a lot of empathy, and we're able to draw upon that.
I mean, there's so much in there that I want to maybe dive into. One thing that you mentioned, and it really just dawned on me right now as you're describing this, the Be Here, the Be Here initiative. I love the duality of it, because it's both being here for the community, being here for your customers, for your pets, but then I think the duality of it is that it's also internal.
Yes, absolutely.
So being here for your employees and supporting employees, and ultimately they're the ones supporting your pets and your customers, but the organization is supporting employees. I think that's powerful.
Yeah, no, and you know, it's worked so well, and I love that, the duality. You're absolutely right. And what we appreciate about it is it's not forced. You know, we have a very tenured workforce. We have associates, 18,000 associates across the U.S. who really care about the animals they see on a day-to-day basis, so that we can be here for them, and then we can also have that internal rallying cry. Has been really, you know, it's been important, and has helped create some momentum. As you know, during COVID, more and more folks have gotten pets, and we've seen our business, you know, really expand, and that's been fantastic. So, you know, the importance of what we do, I think we're all even more aware of it, because, you know,
Yeah.
during COVID, there is isolation, right?
Yeah.
You know, we did a couple of things with the brand, or with the hospitals, that we moved toward a touchless society. The whole idea that you could do drop off as opposed to coming into our hospitals, the whole idea that you could do all of the paperwork digitally. So, you know, it has helped in so many ways sort of organize all of our thoughts
Yeah.
and the organization, in terms of how can we be here for the clients that we serve, how can we be here for the pets that we serve, and how can, quite frankly, it's been wonderful, how can we be here for each other? You know, our field organization is amazing. It's you know, they did not have the luxury of not working, because they were, you know, essential workers.
Yeah.
So our vets were on the front line. And you know, it just gives it even more meaning to the whole be here, you know. So and I know I've had to take my pup in, and so grateful that, you know, everything has worked smoothly, that that these doctors are so committed, right?
Yeah.
So it's just been an interesting time. I'm curious, you know, see how historians look back at what has happened in this last year, and the commitment that employees have had and people have had. And veterinarians have been essential workers. They have been on the front lines as well with your pets. So
Yeah.
it's been an interesting rallying cry.
Yeah, I mean, it's been interesting to say the least, and I'm very hopeful that a lot of the goodwill, and a lot of the one thing that this last year has shown us is just how empathetic we all
Yes.
can be, how you know, how well we can show up for each other,
Yeah, it's
and
true.
and it's
It's true.
important.
Yeah, kindness has played a huge role, don't you think, in sort of every brand's development. So it certainly is something that I think we see on a daily basis, because we do care for animals.
Yeah, kindness, compassion, empathy.
Empathy, so important, right?
So important, so
So
important.
important. Yeah.
Um, I want to circle back to another thing you mentioned, which was, again, really fascinating,
Yeah.
which is you mentioned that a lot of companies will sort of set it and forget it, this purpose. And for some companies, some brands, it really is a living and breathing thing. And by God, I mean, it feels like at Banfield, it really is a living and breathing thing
Yeah.
on a daily basis across the organization. And so I'm just wondering if there are ways, if you can maybe think about things that you do that are deliberate, perhaps that others in the audience can emulate, to always keep the purpose top of mind. And I know it's going to be contextual based on
Yeah.
different
Yeah.
businesses, but what are some things that maybe others could emulate?
Well, you know, I think we're really lucky in so many ways at Banfield. First of all, our CEO, Brian Garish, lives and breathes the mission, right? So it comes from the top down, you know, and it comes, you know, Brian runs Banfield Pet Hospitals, but we're part of Mars, obviously. And Mars is an incredibly mission-based organization. You know, it cares greatly about its associates. It cares about people. So I think when you think about what do you do, I think, you know, it's certainly helpful that if your entire structure is about your purpose. And I think it's important that you have consistency, you know, and you talked about this, you know, that your employees buy in, as well as the consumers understand sort of what is your purpose. So I think there's consistency of messaging, consistency of behavior. One of the things I love about Banfield is we walk the walk. You know, we are in those communities, we are making a difference. We do have a nonprofit arm. So not only will you see sort of in print, we have a great communications department that helps sort of, you know, explain the work that we're doing and share the work we're doing, but you'll see a consistency in that. And you'll see that, you know, the work that we do in the communities, it all ladders up to our purpose, a better world for pets. So, you know, I think it is, you know, a couple of things. I think it's having the support of senior management. It's making sure all your message is aligned and consistent. It's, you know, having employees and associates rather that also build, buy into what you're saying That's
Yeah.
critical, But I think at the end of the day, we have those 1,000 different hospitals, and when you walk into them, you're going to see our commitment to the pets. You're going to see the commitment to our purpose. We live it. And the thing about veterinarian work and what people are doing is that, the folks who do it are about it. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
we're vets, so it's kind
Yeah.
of fascinating. So, I walk into and I work with people who are naturally committed. It's not like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to go there and do something else. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
this is what they do. So it's with that comes a lot of amazing energy and emotion, but it's also focused on the mission.
Yeah. That's
So.
fantastic. One of the things that we've seen, and it's been an interesting trend that we follow, but in recent years we've been seeing a lot of purpose-driven, mission-driven brands start to have success and start to really gain some momentum. And I'm curious, given your background, given your experience across different industries and companies, what do you think are some of the market dynamics that are driving this shift, driving this momentum?
Yeah. Well, I really think it's changing demographics. When I look at sort of, what millennial and is it Gen Z, what they require from their employers, what they want from their lives, very different. And I'm a boomer. I'm at the end of it. But what I expect, what I ask of myself, of my corporation, or where I work is very different. Then I love the fact that the millennials walk their walk, like this is what they're demanding of organizations. This is what they require. They don't separate their work self from their real self. And I think that's a little different and generational. But I think there's also a wonderful energy as you see these demographic shifts, that they are very interested in brands that live the purpose and brands that underscore what's important to them. I think that's fantastic. You'll see that generation lean more into social issues. That generation, it's just fascinating. So I think that is, you have to meet the consumer where they're at, right? And that's today's consumer is just very different. Their demands are different, and I think it's fantastic. I look at, I have a son who works for Disney, and he says my mom worked in marketing before there was digital, and I'm like, really? Makes me feel like a dinosaur, but I'm not. Because digital has not been around that long.
Yeah. Yeah. That's funny.
I know, I'm like, so, I think all of these digital natives are just, making so many things possible and important for brands, how we need to respond to their needs and their wants. It's fascinating, but it's exciting, right? Because it brings change.
Yeah.
And things are evolving. So I think all of that has made you have to be, how are you going to be a purpose-driven organization? I mean, you have organizations like Chase coming out in support of social issues.
Yeah.
That's amazing. The NFL, I mean, it's fantastic. And of course, Mars, I'm incredibly proud of the stance that they've taken. So I think it's a different world, and I'm glad for it. I'm glad for it.
Yeah, me too. And it's interesting. You hit on some of the younger generations, and they they tend to get catch a lot of flack. But I mean, I love it. I love younger generations, and the fact that they do recognize their values early on, recognize their voice, their power, their level of influence, and really are willing to and have the courage to stand up for it, right? And
courage, absolutely. Yeah. And as a marketer, they make me think differently, right?
Yeah.
Like how am I going to sell to this space? What's important to them? And it's what's wonderful is if you can sell to them and you do things that they value and it's purpose driven, that's great.
Yeah. So similar to this trend towards purpose-driven, mission-driven, we're seeing a lot of brands that align. Consumers are increasingly choosing brands that align with their values, and they're prioritizing things like equity, inclusion and diversity. And so I'm curious, again, from your perspective, why should brands follow suit and really start to elevate the importance of equity, inclusion, and diversity in their organizations?
Well, I think, look, equity, inclusion, diversity are part of the fabric of American life. It's not something, it's not a nice to do. I mean, the fact that you and I are having this discussion shows you how diverse, the world is. So it's not about choosing to do this. This is what's in front of you. This is the best way for you to make money, and brands like that. So there's always an amazing statistics that I always find makes me smile. 40% of millennials consider themselves something other than white. So as you look at the changing demographics of your customer base, you need to be reflective of the society where we live. So do I think diversity, equity, and inclusion are important? Yes, I think they are important because it's incredibly important for businesses to reflect the communities that they serve. And I think you're seeing that across, in every walk of life. So, and I also think different people bring different ideas to the table, and different ideas that are around the table, you get better ideas, and that's what's going to progress and make your corporation, your organization grow. And for me, I've always had diverse teams, and I love working with people who have different ideas. I love working with people who don't look like me. There's no way I could still be marketing and be effective if I wasn't open to everyone. And that's part of that millennial base, right? Part of that Z base. I learned from so many different people. And I think equity and inclusion is part of that, putting your biases aside and realizing that, the fabric of America is changing drastically, as it should. And that's a good thing because it brings more smart people, more thoughts around your table. So, and I think it's wonderful that organizations like Banfield, Mars, one of the things that's interesting about Banfield is 85% of our workforce is female. It's young and it's largely white, so it's interesting to see sort of how Banfield has taken a really aggressive stance in terms of how are we more reflective of the communities where we reside. And I think that's a good thing, so it's like.
Absolutely. And I know that Banfield is a tremendous leader in this space, and you've done a lot of things, and so I'm wondering if you can maybe share some of the efforts that you've stood up and some of the initiatives that you're driving to really drive this focus on equity, inclusion, and diversity.
Well, first of all, we have a CEO, Brian Garish, who walks the walk, very involved in sort of, that the whole diversity, equity, inclusion, very front and center, which is great. We also have huge P&O, people and organization initiatives that are a part of making sure that we're hiring as many diverse people as we can, that making sure that our slates, when we look at people, that they are indeed diverse. We have diversity resource councils that were, you have African American, Hispanic, Asian. So as well as the gay community, we all have different resource groups to make sure that the voices of those communities are heard and are part of the thinking and the strategies as we look at our customers, as we look at the folks we serve, our associates. So it's just, again, and I'm a big seat at the table, making sure that all the voices have access. We also have a wonderful partnership with Tuskegee, which has a veterinarian school. So we give money to Tuskegee, and we also we share a partnership with them. So it's been just, again, how are we doing things that can actively support various communities? And the reason to do that is not because it's good to do. It always makes me smile. I was like, because this is the world we live in,
Yeah.
So yes, I do think at Banfield, again, we have leadership that really enthusiastically embraces, and equity, inclusion, and diversity initiatives. And it's very diverse. On our leadership team, we have African American women, we have Asians, we have a lot of, it's just, when I look at Banfield, I'm like, oh my God, we're not the future, we're now,
Right now. Exactly.
We're right now. So that's a good thing. So again, it's being, proactive and realizing that the world is so much larger than than a boardroom that is all white or all male.
Yeah.
So
And one thing that I find fascinating about what you're doing is that a lot of organizations, they may be making these changes internally within their organization, but one thing that I find fascinating about Banfield is that you're really also looking broader beyond that into the entire industry and
mhm,
really driving a more diverse pipeline of veterinarians in this profession. And that's a big commitment of yours as well.
it
Um,
is. It is. There are certainly resource groups that we manage and we support that underscore the need for diversity, and our chief medical officer is very involved in that.
mm,
So it's helpful that, again, we've put together sort of a charge of activities that we're going to support, and it's being supported by very senior people. And I think that's different,
yeah,
or can be different. So,
yeah,
and we have long-term plans about how we can make a difference. Ultimately, I mean, Brian, the CEO, talks about sort of, you go into communities that have never seen veterinarians that look like them, and we want to make sure
mm,
that everyone has the opportunity, if indeed they have that calling when they're 7 or 8, let's make sure that we make it possible for them to be a vet.
that's fantastic. So given the audience, with a lot of marketers,
Yeah.
one question that's coming up is, what role should marketers play in promoting EI&D?
Yeah. Well, I think understanding, I think as a marketer, you have to understand how diverse perspectives motivate your work, how important it is for, everyone, not everyone, but it's how important it is to make sure that you're getting diverse thoughts, diverse people who are part of your solution. Otherwise you're really not going to make the impact that you want, because American society is diverse.
Mhm.
So as marketers, I think you have to be aware of your own narrowing, right? Be aware, self-aware that when you have people of different races around the table, you're not doing it because it's good to do. You're doing it because it's economic, because that's how you will make money. So I,
Yeah,
I think it's as a marketer, you really need to think about sort of what does the world look like, and what's the best way to reach these different audiences. And you may not have all the answers, so you want to assemble a team that, quite frankly, is more reflective of American society. And I
yeah,
think as you do that, it will be diverse.
yeah, yeah. One thing that I just find interesting, so we see a lot of early stage startups that are
Yeah.
new ventures, and one of the things that I've seen recently is, or in the last, I don't know, 5 years or so, is just the diversity of founders, and the ideas that they're pursuing are fundamentally different than even the ideas that were 5 years ago. And it's because they have a different perspective and they're able to see opportunities
Yes.
that others, quite frankly, just didn't, because
Right.
they don't see it from their lens. And so I think in a similar way, it's just about perspective, ideas, having a different perspective on the world and being able to see
Right.
different ideas.
I agree with you. It's just, I think it's always interesting because look, obviously I'm Black, I'm a woman. So I have a perspective and I see outside of just sort of that sort of what works for white America, because I have to.
Yeah,
But if you're white, you may not see outside of what works for white America. You know what I mean? Like I have been enculturated to understand how does a larger community look at this. But I don't know from a Black standpoint, or as a woman's standpoint, you may view this a little differently. So I think you have to be aware.
yeah,
That self-awareness is, I think, has always kept me sort of on my toes. That how do you market to these different communities? Because I think what you're seeing in that equity space is that there's money there.
yeah,
So different ideas. So I think you have to stay. That's why I talk about my kids, because they've made me aware of so much, right? Like I'm like, oh, I'm learning constantly. And I think
yeah,
as a marketer, you have to be learning constantly.
yeah. In a way, it's recognizing your blind spots, right?
You said it best. Absolutely. Absolutely. But I'm not sure as a white, marketers always know they have blind spots.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because it's individual blind spots and then organizational blind spots.
Yes, absolutely.
And
Absolutely. So,
it can be, you might not be aware of it, and it's funny because I always think of, there's I think it's maybe it's called the Johari window, where there's the blind spots that you know of, and there's the blind spots that you don't know of.
It's true. It's
And
true.
so,
It's true.
just
But
getting
you have to be open to the fact that you have blind spots. That's where I find, right, people like, we know have all the answers. I'm like, you don't. No one does, right? Because it's always evolving and changing. So being open to the fact that you have blind spots,
Yeah, no, that's great. I think that's a good one. That's a good practical advice to maybe seek that out proactively.
Seek that out. Yeah. So
you've mentioned a lot in terms of culture and how do you drive these sort of purpose-driven, mission-driven initiatives organizationally, and a lot of it has to do with is driving alignment, having commitment from leadership. There's a lot of leaders in the audience as well today, and so what practical advice would you give them? What would you give them in leadership positions?
Well, I think it's interesting. I think so many people have great ideas about culture and sort of how to make those change, how to change culture, which can be very difficult to do. But I think the way to get that alignment is to make sure everyone is aware of where you're going. I think sometimes people are not sort of, you have to be open. I hate to use this word, but you need sometimes internal campaigns that people understand, what is the vision? What is the why? Why are we doing this? And I think it's really important, that communication factor, to have a communication partner, not only having all of the leadership team in agreement, but having, a roadmap that everyone has leaned into and agrees and able to communicate that. That's where the real magic happens, because you have to, especially at Banfield, you got 18,000 people, you may have a leadership team of 10, but how do you make the decisions that are supported by these 10 people? How do you make the other 18,000 aware of them? And I think that goes to the consistency, the roadmap, the vision, the communication plan, and then do it all over again. You know what I mean? To keep saying it. But I think that is a way that you impact culture in a meaningful way. But sometimes I'm sure you find organizations you're having the same conversations with the same people, but then the other people aren't going to be aware of what this movement is about. How do you make sure that you're touching as many different people in a way that's important to them? So
you mentioned something very interesting, which is internal. I like the way you phrase it, internal campaigns, and it's almost like an internal roadmap around communication and just reiterating the vision, reiterating the purpose, the why, and really treating it like a campaign, similar to the way that you would do it externally, right?
Absolutely, and that's how you'll bring about not only people understanding the vision, but hopefully buying into it.
Yeah. So Ariel, I'm not sure if you're cutting us off here, but I haven't gotten to Q&A, and there's a bunch of questions. So I'm wondering if I could maybe ask one or two of these.
How about we do a lightning round of 2 of them?
Okay, sounds good. Let me pick. Okay, here's a good one. When everything is back to normal, how will your industry have changed permanently?
In a couple of ways. I think that whole touchless society, making sure that we have digital pathways to reach our customer, making sure that we have convenience. Right now, customers cannot come into our Banfield stores. We do a lot of sort of people waiting because it's just, because of COVID. We can't have lots of people sort of standing in line. So we've just got very more thoughtful and smarter about all of our digital contacts. So you'll see us being more efficient and more customer ready. So I think it's sort of that map, that digital map that we had sped up, and in a very good way. So I think you'll see more efficiency.
That's fantastic. And then the last one, and this one's from Lauren. Love this discussion, purpose and puppies. How is Banfield measuring the success of its purpose communications?
Well, again, we measure it through engagement. If you're talking about in terms of how many employees have responded to our emails, to our internal websites, how do internals respond? We have very good feedback loops. We talk to people on a quarterly basis to get sort of their insights and their thoughts. So again, it's being purposeful about, making sure there's a feedback loop. So
Yeah.
that's how we'll measure it. We'll measure it by levels of engagement, whether it's digital, whether it's people attending our internal meetings. So it's how engaged are they? People,
Yeah.
you know, if you have 16,000 employees and you hear from 5, you got a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, okay. I guess that's it, right?
Thank you so much for including me. I look forward. Thank you so much for your time. It's been great to talk to you, Jesus, and
Yeah,
Ariel. Thank you.
Lisa.
Thank you both so much for fostering such crucial, important, and